So, hello, everybody. Today we're going to be speaking with Jacque Salomon from the Seeds to Inspire Foundation. And I just want to say a couple words about how I met Jacque. So, Jacque and I met at an integrative healthcare conference, and she spoke about her life and her family and her dreams and her work with communities and food as medicine and getting people reconnected to kind of the land that they live on and near, and I was very inspired. So I went up and talked to her. We talked about our kids a little bit. We just connected on a little bit of a level that you don't expect initially. I like to say that we started in the middle. We skipped over the beginning. And then Jacque and I worked together a little bit more. She was on board of advisors for an organization I was directing for a while, and she was very valuable in that role as well. So, Jacque, our conversations here on Radically Human are pretty free flowing. So what we'd like you to do is just tell us about who you are, what matters to you, how are you spending your time, and yeah, just give us some background.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be invited into this space. And thank you, Jennifer, for being my friend and colleague these years and for feeling that connection that brought us here today. So I like to say, first of all, I appreciate that I don't know where this conversation is going to lead us and to be open for the flow of where the universe is guiding us to take our connection here. Um, my story of becoming a health and wellness coach starts with activism. And it was the activism of protecting my children and the environments and the systems that were affecting the health and physical and emotional health of my children. And if you follow my journey, you'll understand that that led to the public school system, specifically special education in the public school system, and how those systems failed my children. And that led me into understanding that the stress and the emotional tax that it took created disease in my body. And it was understanding how that connection occurred and how it was affecting my children. That led me down a rabbit hole of physical health, and which eventually led me to a whole plant nutrition. And it was that merging of those worlds is what brought me to start Seeds to Inspire Foundation and to understand that, especially for the children, but for those that the marginalized of the marginalized, that in order to truly heal and to become the best versions of ourselves, which we're all on a mission to become, requires a healthy, sustainable environment and a compassionate, trauma-informed environment to do so.
Yeah. So, Jacque, I know you live in Phoenix, and Phoenix is really the center of climate crisis for, for this country. I think it's last year was 100 days over 100 degrees. Can you tell us a little bit more about how your work intersects with, the realities of kind of the Earth poly crisis that we're experiencing?
So to bring that down to the micro and to understand how the people, my neighbors, my colleagues, my friends, brothers and sisters I have yet to meet, how their lives, their everyday lives, have to continue to be more dangerous in consequence to more systems that they had no participation in. And that is something that is to my core reflects my lived experience and how I got to my healing. So it activates me even more to stand up and take my healing and interfere with those systems. For instance, to have sustainable, organic, locally grown food. So we can teach people how to be healthy. We can teach people about the nutrients, and we can teach people about the perils of eating certain eating patterns. But they don't have access to those foods, then what are we doing? If we don't have safe spaces for our communities to go out in the shade and be able to sit and get fresh air, take some sun, if we don't have areas where the elderly can be accompanied, where we have systems where the seniors and the youth have places of healing, have places to continue to grow, make those generations, connect. So we've been able to provide opportunities for gardens because gardens are the space where we are teaching not only how growing our own food impacts, incredibly impacts our environmental footprint, on how it creates an entirely different ecosystem, which then leads us to education and teaching the youth, not only about this connection, but about the physical health and about how we can heal our trauma and our stress by being in the garden. So, really, being in the garden is really a connection and opportunity for us to heal, for others to heal naturally, organically, but also to be able to learn about these systems for food and health for the environment and all how all of these systems are connected. I also do coaching and health and wellness coaching as a trauma-informed practitioner. And what that means is I teach people when they want to be taught, or I support people on their path to creating behavioral shifts that are benefit for themselves, mind, body, and spirit to heal through the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine, which at the core is whole plant nutrition.
How do these incredible levels of heat affect young people? I mean, I recall leaving school at say 3 o'clock, and I could go out and play, and often my day it's more important for me to go and run around after school than it was to go to school. And it would seem that if it's like 110 degrees, that's really going to cut into that time. Are there programs available in the area for this? I mean, what options have you explored concerning them? After school recreation, just as a specific example.
So I have the privilege of working with an after school program, and we started a garden. And immediately we've already hit 100 degrees here.
Yes.
So we've already seen how this is already affecting the children. They come from school, they're all day sitting in their seats, especially our young ones. And they come after school, they get whatever snacks are available because we do work in areas where there's food insecurity. So a lot of these after school centers will feed the children, so that these children are not hungry, support the families, but are they getting the best that they can be getting? Are we supporting them with nutritious food, or are we seeking just to mitigate hunger? So then we have that element, and now we're inside. Now they're not going out in the garden. Now they want to be out in the garden, and we have to find creative ways to have them inside. And it's April.
Yeah.
So imagine throughout the entire summer. And we have explored organizations, and I'm not saying there are so many amazing organizations, grassroots organizations that are doing amazing work to create areas for people to be out of the heat. But we talk about systems and currency and money. Where was the funding going? Are these opportunities funded enough so that our children do have somewhere to go where they're moving, and they're not just sitting there and they're watching movies because that's all the funding they can afford? And we shouldn't have to be able to buy programs like that. We shouldn't have to be able to afford programs like that. And they are available. Swimming, there's taking them out to the forest. But can we afford those things?
Right.
You mentioned your children in school and your concerns about their education. I'm curious about what you saw there and the state of the schools in the modern world, education. What do you see happening there or not happening there?
That's a whole other podcast, but I'll see how I can respond to that quickly.
Well, did your kids enjoy school? What was your concern for them when they would say, come home from school? What were they learning or not learning?
They were forced to learn things that they were uninterested in because it was delivered in ways that was uninteresting to them, and therefore they're and not conducive to the way they take in and process and synthesize information. And it was those pieces that made attending school painful
Mm-hmm.
and resentful. My children went through a lot of trauma in the school system. And so there was years of healing that came from that. And it took my children in a direction where once they were in an environment that was completely conducive to their learning styles, that was for special education. However, it was the entire day was just small learning environment, potential driven education, supportive teachers, and they thrived. I mean, I always knew they were brilliant, but I'm biased. But to witness them go from, I'm just stupid, I'm a bother, nobody wants to help me, I can't do testing, what does that mean for me? I'm not going to be anything. To really, for them to sit in their brilliance and be able to see it, that's the difference. And that's the opportunity that every child should be surrounded by, that potential driven education, teaching them through their environment, giving them an opportunity to engage what they're learning practically in their learning environment. Because when my children were able to do that, they thrived.
So are they aware of the climate crisis?
Yes, very much so. It's almost impossible with me as a mom not to be.
And how do they respond to that?
So they are both activists in their own way. So they've been plant-based since they were 16 years old. And they work in the community and to create spaces for people to not only learn about what it means to heal your stress, how it means to heal your trauma, but also through culture, but also through expression, through food. So one of my sons is learning to be a plant-based chef, and he's practicing to be a plant-based chef, and he just wants everyone to go out there and be able to eat more plants and be healthy and grow food. And he wants a garden in the backyard and to be able to show everyone how to do that and why. And then my other son, his twin, is actually working with children in the environment and representing health and wellness and teaching about the intersection of health and wellness and cultural expression and healing through stress, through fun. So they're taking their natural talent, skills, everything they've learned, and they lead not with this is what we have to do with the environment, but learning naturally and organically those connections. So those intrinsic changes come from the children and come from those that we engage with.
Nice.
Yeah. I mean, as much as we've talked so far, the theme of mental health has been kind of laced throughout, and you've talked about trauma. But I'd love to hear more your thoughts on mental health as it relates to, climate anxiety, climate grief, the intersections of all the ways in which we have very poor health behaviors that you're trying to address with food as medicine and building community and all those things. I think the mental health piece is sometimes needs to precede the physical health piece, because in the way that I practice Ayurvedic medicine, it's very difficult to establish behavior change in a person whose nervous system is like a 5-alarm fire.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'll share with you my lived experience and then what I experience in those that I coach. In my experience, what led me to being healthy was the trauma. It was understanding that I was just done being sick. I was done being stressed. I was done being unloved. I was done being disrespected. I was just done. And I knew that I had nothing left. And so what took me there was, I have children. I I have children that are looking to me to understand that there's a way through this and out of this. And that's what led me to being healthier. I didn't want to die and be orphaned my children after the trauma that we had experienced as a family when my eldest passed away at 11 years old. And we were still healing from that. So being so sick and being so stressed and being so overburdened, I could not even think about the environment. I couldn't even think about, there was just nothing. So I wanted to live and I wanted to be able to look forward to every day being the best I could be. And that led me to being healthy. However, once I started feeling better, I could sit with the activations a lot better. And that led me to be able to sit and be able to adapt now new ways to sit with my pain and my confusion and my anxiety and be able to apply tools to help restabilize my central nervous system. So it really started from the inside, creating an environment for the inside so that I could feel better. I was sleeping more. I could walk. I was able to move my body in ways that I was like, okay, I can watch this video and I can learn. I can do some tapping. Maybe I can meditate for 30 seconds more than I did yesterday. And it was able to then learn lovingly without judgment. And that was another thing, because then we started, you don't want this enough. You don't want to be healthy. And it wasn't that. It was understanding that my trauma was constantly being activated and I didn't have the energy or the space or the capacity to deal with it. So I kept pushing it away. So if we can understand what our motivation is to be healthy and find that beacon, then we'll start creating the environment so we can continue to incorporate those tools to make the shifts. We have to deal with this story and program that we've been conditioned to believe of what it is to be human and who we are, especially those that are getting healthy and looking around and it feels hopeless in a world that is not acting human.
Mhm.
I hope I answered your
Yes. No, I think that's you're really pointing to something I think that is very important to me, but I think also important to this podcast, which is that um, we in this society that the four of us are from, we think a lot about what it means to be an individual. But being an individual only has meaning and value in the context of networks of relationships. And sometimes if we don't feel well mentally or physically or spiritually, it's almost impossible for us to connect, right? And then that isolation and that alienation increases. And um, and so I hear what you're saying, and sometimes the directionality will go one way, and sometimes it'll go another way. Sometimes we can't engage in spiritual practice if we're physically unwell, but sometimes we can't attend to our physical wellness if our spirituality is imbalanced. So it's really, it's very individualized. But how do you think about that, Jackie, with the people that you work with?
We're all about collaboration. And I think it starts with understanding that I am blessed to work in a community of incredible leaders and wisdom teachers and just those that have become experts in their areas and their skill sets and their focus, but also carry with the same frequency of humility and understanding that I've perfected my piece. It's just my piece. Like we need each other to put the pieces together. So I get to be in that space all the time where that's the reality, is understanding that we are connected through our hearts. Magnetically, we're attracted to one another, that we are connected to Mother Earth in a way that we are her, she is us. We are connected to the cosmos, that to work along people, understanding that connection is reality, that we get to move independently and individually through purpose, but ultimately is to come back together and understanding how all of those purposes come together to make the world a better place. So it's all about collaboration. It's all about community. And what I've learned, not only kind of like working with systems to create that collaboration and what can come from that, but also when I'm coaching clients, usually the leaders are the ones that do the individual, and usually those community partners are the ones that want to do groups because there's so much medicine in the group dynamic that I, as an individual, can bring as much skill as I can as a coach, and your life. But there's something when we come together and speak those realities and learn from one another. That's a whole other wisdom that I feel that now is what we're being called to do, is to come together and bring our pieces together and weave that tapestry of what is coming together.
It does seem, though, that as the climate crisis gets worse, the many people will suffer individually, and they'll be struggling, so much to get food to eat, to take care of their children, to take care of their retirement if they have a retirement, that it may be even more difficult for someone to step back from their day-to-day crisis and think about what's going to happen in 20 years if I don't do something about the environment. And other than working one-on-one with people, which is certainly, apparently absolutely necessary, are there any systems or societal changes you think would be important that could help people get their perspective, even as things get worse?
The reality is we're going to lose a lot of people. It's a painful reality. It just is. I watched what happened here in Phoenix, especially on the reservations and in prison systems and in nursing homes when COVID was here. I saw what happened when we reached the climate crisis last summer. I watched what happened to our communities. However, I feel that this is twofold. One is we need to create sustainable regenerative food systems. That's, to me, that's where we are. And this is where we teach. I have the experience of when I engage community, this is something they already know intrinsically. They know this. They want this. There's no convincing. And I'm not about arguing. I mean, you're aligned, you're aligned. This is the reality, this is the truth, this is what we have to do. Are we working together? Otherwise, you can choose your path, because that leads to death and that leads to just decay. So we create opportunities for people to learn and come and get healthy and reestablish the food system. And I believe that we all must understand how our systems are unnatural, come from systems that are harmful, are imposed, especially on Indigenous sisters and brothers. And I believe that the solutions have always been there. And I believe if we humble ourselves and we understand our duty as human beings to learn where all our roots come from, and how we have disconnected with our relationship with Earth, and learn from those that never, ever lost, that never forgot. I believe that is our duty as human beings, to humble ourselves and learn and remember from those that have fought to hold on to those truths for hundreds and thousands of generations. And I believe that we have a duty to give back to our Indigenous brothers and sisters the home that was taken from them.
Mhm. We've talked to a lot of conservationists, and they all say kind of the same thing, is that to make any progress here, we have to move to a biocentric philosophy and to give up this philosophy of human supremacy and human exceptionalism that so dominates the Western world. And that's an indigenous view, right? This biocentric point of view that the world is alive, and that if we were to honor that, that we'd be much better off. And those voices are out there, but they're not being heard.
I want to make clear that I don't represent anyone except what I have learned from these teachers and how I've applied that in my life and what I do. And I speak from that experience. Their voices need to be they need to be leading the table, they need to be sitting at the head and leading the conversations. And they are absolutely, we have Indigenous climate scientists that are out there and speaking. We need to have a time where we sit down and we give them the microphone and say, all of us, because my people come from the Caribbean, come from Puerto Rico, and we moved to the land of the Lenape for a better opportunity. Someone else has stolen land. And then when our heart broke and we had to move to Phoenix, I relocated to find healing, and I landed in someone else's stolen home. There's been such a privilege and honor to have been able to raise my family and to play and live and work on someone else's stolen land. That is that reality and the truth that we are not talking about enough. And we need to have these climate scientists that have spent a lifetime, again, cultivating that wisdom that has been so kept, right, to pass down through stories and generations and experience. It is our duty. It's our duty to do that. And I learned that from being in a family, um, that we lost our indigeneity, that we lost and we adopted a story of what it means to be um, Taino people walking this planet, to be have inherited the legacy of slavery and colonization. I lost myself in that story, and it was finding that connection that I found my humanity and led to the work that I do. I believe we all have that duty to ourselves.
I think what you're saying is really important, Jacque, because um, the restoration of dignity, integrity, and authenticity to all people is like a prerequisite for a, you know, a biosphere-based system of mutual aid that uplifts everyone. And the catch seems to always be the issue of ceding power. In order for that system to take root, the people who have power must cede power to others. And that is an unattractive prospect for a lot of people who are already maybe have amassed, more power than they should have. And so, I mean, I don't have the answers to that, obviously, but I think that when we think about our current understanding of what economics is comprised of, we know it's a very destructive system, and it's a system in which harm comes to a lot of people for a few people to prosper.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the thing we hear often is that they say capitalism turns communities into commodities. And I think that's really true. Not just human communities, but also biological communities. Turn them into commodities, and then you can monetize them and imperialize them and get rich in the process. Not a good system.
So I'll respond because again, I go to the spiritual kind of like realm and talk about what I see and what I experience from the spiritual perspective, but pragmatically here in this third dimensional experience. What helped me understand that was just being raised in the home that I was. And to me, that's where it comes from. Power and agency and the pains and the stories that we learn about what agency and free will is, and suffering and pain and connection is in childhood. And I just feel like there's a whole lot of people that learned a whole lot of very destructive lessons, painful lessons in childhood, and are projecting that out into the world and coming together to share that and feed each other through those wounds and through violence. Because you cannot make a world be so self-destructive unless we're terrified, we're in lack, and we're in pain, and we're suffering, and we're sick. What happens when you give an opportunity for people to be healthy and joyful and loved and have dignity? So power needs, in order to feed that energy, to feed itself, it needs to suppress that story. And again, why do you need that power? Being raised in a home where my mother's way of parenting was incredibly painful, was incredibly destructive for my psyche, for my agency, for my free will, but it required consent. That power required consent. So what happened when I learned enough about myself and I relinquished consent and I took back my free will? So it's about, why did you need that power and what is that power doing for you? Again, where are we, how is that power being translated every day in our lives? How can we take that power back? Well, I did that when I decided to take my health back and said, I'm not participating in this system. I work very hard, and I know that you may not deem the work that I do very high within currency exchange, but I get to still choose what I do with that little bit of money, and I choose to participate in the system. And I was liberated, mind, body, and spirit, so I can do what I'm doing. So you look at that power, and how really is that power siphoning our free will, and what do we do about that? How can we use that agency to then diminish the power that that system has over us? And understanding and looking at it right in the eye, not with fear, but really true understanding. And that's deflating. And that's what I experienced, not only in my life, but also the power that those systems had once I understood. And once I could step into it consciously and with intention, they had no more power over me. I hope that answered your question.
One of the things we focus on, or we try to focus on, is how can people live in a radically human way, given the environment that we're in, especially the environment here in the West and in the United States. And it seems to me that you're bringing up a very important point, that part of the key to this process is understanding the need to liberate yourself, to step away from the system that envelops us. And you know, you described your journey. What advice would you have for people that feel that they're constricted, that they just can't quite do what they want to do? How do people step out of this and sort of open themselves to other possibilities?
Courage. It's the courage to learn something new, the courage to step in the reality of my participation in something that might be destructive. I think it takes a lot of courage to step into spaces that you may feel unwelcome and offer support and love. I think it's the courage for us to go beyond the stories and step into being uncomfortable and learning how to get out of that discomfort. And I feel that that's what's keeping us siloed. That's what's keeping us individuated in a very toxic way. I feel like, and I'll share my sister's story, she doesn't mind. But my sister has MS, and being my sister, she gets to hear a lot of all the justice work that I'm doing. And I try to be mindful of that because she is still adapting tools to help her heal her body. But then she watches a couple of clips on YouTube and she's just like, I can't. And she shuts down. I just can't. And it's like, where's the meditation? Where's this? I just can't. So I remind her, what makes you feel better? What makes you feel better? Come to this meeting with me. Just trust everything that you've learned. And when she comes to a community event with me, she leaves like a whole different person because we coming together, because you don't feel alone, because you don't go in a cycle of there's nothing we can do. There's just too much going on. Like, what can I do? I'm just one person. This is just hopeless. You come together and there's that vibrancy and that fire that ignites in that then she leaves and she's excited about the next time. And then she remembers that although I'm disabled, although I can't do the things that I did, I still have skills. I still have talent. There's still ways that I can do something. And that then revives her agency and she can participate in ways that make her feel good. And it reminds her that she has something to contribute. So I feel like if we can have the courage to sit in and say, I am important. What I have to say does mean something. My lived experience is important. I want to connect. I want to be in those spaces. I want to learn. I want to read a book. And you know what? I just want to be the best version I can be. That's going to naturally bring you in connection. Naturally. when you take that to say, I don't want to do this anymore, and I don't know where the next step is, but I know that I want to do something. And what does that mean? Does that mean I focus on my sleep? Does that mean I attend a meeting? Does that mean I take a course? Does that mean I read a book? Trust your that child, that curiosity, that researcher, as children. Let that lead you to the next step, and trust yourself. Because when you have that intention to be yourself, your best self, and you do it wholeheartedly, and you know that this is going to lead you to something better, and that you are committed to making the world a better place. And you know what? For me, there's no other option. There's no option. It's going to happen, and I'm going to figure this out, and I'm going to connect myself with people. I believe that that's that fire that brings us together to move through this chaos and remind ourselves that this is a fabricated system, and we have full power, control, agency through love, through intelligence, through connection to rewrite this clean slate and start a new world. And when we sit in that reality, have the courage to walk in that path, that's where the change happens.
Yeah. I think what you're saying about agency actually coming from community at times, you don't have to enter community with agency. You can leave community leave the community or leave with agency as a result of that community connection. So I thought that was really beautiful, that example of your sister. And I think it's that collective work of identifying what are these emancipatory practices that we're all trying to do together. To me, that's why this podcast matters to me, is because collectively, I want all of us to identify what are these emancipatory practices that we can all engage in. And, Jackie, I was thinking this morning, what does it mean to me that I consider Jackie my colleague? And I was thinking, it's because I breathe a little bit easier. Because of what Jackie's doing in the world, I can exhale that much more. I don't need to know day to day every single little thing that you're doing, but I know with your meaning and intention and your sense of purpose and our understanding of each other as being like-minded, that in your little corner of the world, you're progressing this project of emancipatory practices for collective, liberation. And so it's just that tiny piece off my plate because it's on your plate. And I thought that's what a colleague is to me. And so to have colleagues in the process of creating these transformative meanings is giant. And we don't always have to be in the same physical space, but we can work together even, through that little thread of intention.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. And thank you for reflecting that. And I've always seen you as this incredible fractal of like, wow, that's me in another point in time in this reality. And I get to move through, and my energy gets to move through and see the world through you. So thank you so much for your brilliance and your wisdom. And I really see you as like holding down. Like I'm always like, Jennifer's over there holding it down. She's doing her thing. And I so appreciate that. And then even preparing for this space I called in the ability and the words to convey how I can contribute to this conversation, how we can come together. Hopefully, there's curiosity that's sparked and connections to continue to build and bridge our worlds together to see that pathway. My kids raised me as a comic book mom, so I'm like, yeah, I see the bridge in Thor. Like that's us just blessing. Like I won't see it everything in metaphor. I'm also a writer. So I live in metaphor, but I'm just envisioning like what we're doing, what seeds that we've planted in this beautiful food forest, of brilliance and wealth and color and music and sound and the healing that'll come from that. So thank you.
Well, one thing we often hear in the climate movement is the phrase "action is the antidote to despair," and a lot of climate therapists use that language, and it makes total sense to me. It's like, as you've got to move forward, and it reminds us of art and creativity. And I'm just curious to hear, do you work with your people from an artistic point of view? Do you encourage them to create art? Do you encourage them to identify as artists?
What a beautiful question. So yes, 100%. That's the part of being trauma informed, is understanding how culture and how we've been so removed from our culture is a trauma. Assimilation, how that is a trauma and how that affects us. So I partner with organizations that do beautiful, beautiful things in the community with bringing culture and healing. So I have the privilege of working with an organization called School of Hip Hop here in Phoenix that is committed to working with the youth through that cultural connection, through understanding the history of music and giving them an opportunity to express themselves and reclaim their voice and their talents in culture and be able to express their pain and their beauty and their gifts. And so we partner together for that purpose. That's the bridge where my son is working, is to understand that stress pillar, that social communication pillar that affects our health, mind, body, and spirit. It's important that we can come together in cultural circles, eat the foods that are culturally vibrant, that are culturally meaningful to us. If we can go back and remember the music, the songs, the stories, there's just something about music, and again, that's another podcast when we could talk about music and energy, but when we can engage our ancestral ways and connect to the cultures around us and appreciate the cultures around us and that expression, that is healing. There is nothing better to me than to go over to all these other festivals and listen to the music, and I just gravitate to the instruments and learn of the history of the instruments, how they came to be. And that in itself is incredibly healing because that reminds us how human we are. That's what being human is. So ultimately, through health, we cannot rehumanize unless we are incorporating that and that curiosity and that exploration as to culture, our culture and the culture of others.
Yeah, I think creativity is a key feature of a vibrant living system, whether that be an individual, a community, an earth-based system. So I'm so glad that that got brought up here. What else do we want to talk with Jacque about? Tell us, Jacque, what, an idealized vision for where you want your work to go.
Right.
If everything kind of flowed in the right direction, what would you see?
My goal is that in my lifetime, Cease to Inspire is not needed anymore. And how do I get there? Is that I have a fully funded organization that all of the volunteers, everyone that has committed in their spare time to come and do this and commit themselves 100%. And what that's going to mean is there's going to be gardens everywhere. There's going to be food growing. There's going to be trees. There's going to be mutual aid. It's going to be so funded. We're going to have school systems where the children are learning equally from books and equally from their environment, where elders are thriving, where we have great great grandparents dancing with the new generation, over a beautiful meal on a Sunday. My dream is for children to given the opportunity and the support and the environment to manifest their purpose and trust their intuition, keep their agency, and join us in their brilliance to create a better world. And I believe I can see that in my lifetime. I plan to live a long time. So I fully plan to see that in my lifetime. I'm committed to that.
What I like about what you just said is that I was picturing it in my mind. And I think what you said is completely consistent with a collapsed society because what you described to me is a reorientation of priorities that will come from the current broken systems that are so destructive kind of falling apart and people coming back together in new configurations. So it's a joyful vision but it can be a vision on the other side of the mess we're currently in, that we accept the non-functionality of the systems that we're sort of stuck in, and that we return to some of what you're talking about: joy, education for its own sake, connection to the environment, intergenerationality. All of these things can be part of a kind of post-collapse societal regeneration. So I think that's hopeful rather than you know a picture of despair. It's very hopeful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. And I really take that again from being able to heal my body and understanding that we're all just fractals. Our entire environment is just fractal, projections of what's going on our inside our mirrors. So how do I apply what I learned? And I learned that my body was in decay and I could surrender to it and just fall, or I could just take steps and understand what I needed to do. And right now I see that we have identified the abscess and we've revealed it, and we're in the pus stage, and it's ugly and it's gross, but we have the skills. We're going to need some rehabilitation. We're going to have to learn to walk again. We're going to take time to heal. We're going to have to prevent being what's the word I'm looking for? Septic. We have to take stages and steps and bring in the experts to prevent us from going septic. And I did go septic when I was diseased, and I almost died. So I see that same fractal. It's just to trust that process, bring the wisdom together, understand that this is where we are, and it's an alchemical process. And we will heal, we'll put light, we'll put sun, we'll hum, we'll dance, we'll feed each other good food, and we will heal, and we'll bring in the experts to rehabilitate, and it's going to take some time, but of course we can do it. I've seen it in my own body. So of course it's possible. It's probable.
I liked Jennifer's comment in this sense that, one of our other, we sort of have a sister website called Parallel Polis, and it has to do with the concept of creating an alternative society while this society is stumbling towards destruction. And a couple of times you mentioned the term funding, and I couldn't help but twitch because I'm a little concerned. I just don't believe that the present structures are going to adequately fund you, but I do believe that the forces exist to support you and support this concept, especially the concept of gardens and the involvement of children in gardens. So I guess what I'm trying to think of is how this movement can continue, Jennifer, between now and then, in the sense of, I don't think we should think of it as the present versus post collapse, but more of a process between now and then. And that we need to concentrate on ways to develop support for all sorts of new ideas within the context of the existing society. We need to figure out how to work together and get some of these things done.
Yeah, that's super important, John. I mean, I want Jacque to speak on this, but just really quick in relation to what you're saying, I think it's true. We have to start working outside the current, violent and destructive systems now.
Right.
So when I talk about healthcare and people say, well, we know our healthcare system is broken. What should we do, though, in terms of accessing healthcare? And one of my responses is, well, you need to work outside the current industry, insurance and reimbursement industry. You need to find a provider that you pay out of pocket. They get more for their skill set, and you ultimately pay less. We need to stop, feeding into the system that is harming us. And I can see that, Jacque's work is very relevant here, because if you are involved with a community garden, you're not buying as much or any ultra processed food
Right.
at the corner store down the street. And maybe you are in a food desert. Maybe there isn't a really fully functioning grocery store, but maybe a farmer's market will grow from the community gardens, and there'll be a system of mutual aid that results from working outside the currently destructive system. So I totally agree with you, John. We need some parallel realities happening. But Jacque, what do you say on this?
Agree 100%. And I have the privilege of working with physicians that are doing the exact same thing, that are in the process of or have removed themselves from the systems. And they're doing private pay, they're doing group visits, they're finding actively ways of recreating a system for those people that are stuck right in the middle, for those that don't have anywhere to turn, to provide that opportunity for them. And then I support them through the coaching. So we have the physicians that are providing the education, doing all the diagnosis, giving them the opportunities to understand and educate them. And then I get to walk alongside people that are stepping in and making these changes and like, let's do this together and figure out the hows. And then we get to, through the organization, be able to provide the locations, make sure that medicine, you have access to the medicine. Food is medicine. It always has been. And what heals kills and what kills heals. And the further we get away from natural organic food, the way it looks like when it came out of the ground, the more that food becomes venom. So we have to go back to basics. We have to go back. And that's the cultural piece, is to understand our relationship to earth and how did our grandparents and great grandparents, how did they eat? What did they eat? And give opportunities for us to do that. That is the entire thing that I'm seeing, is to take these people that are stuck in the system and go back to basics, have the food as medicine right around them, and work with clinicians that are taking this step and stepping away because of burnout, stepping away because they have 6 to 8 months waiting lists for elderly people to come with diagnosis. For children, I've had a client that told me that her 11-year-old was diagnosed with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and it was a 6-month wait to get to the pediatric specialist. And together we did coaching, and in a matter of months, her daughter was able to lose weight. Her daughter was able to start minimizing the effects on her liver. That's the piece that we have to go back to, reminding people of their agency and creating a system where they have access to that food as medicine, to that exercise, to these safe spaces. And that requires, yes, stepping outside of the system. And if we can come together and be that bridge where all of us that understand that this is not working and we're not there yet, we're here. And let's start weaving that together and creating that bridge together. That to me is what I've seen, what I've witnessed, and I get to be an honor to be participating in.
Very nice.
So what about the next 6 months, Jackie? I'm going to put aside the long-term plan. We like to sort of conclude our programs with talking with people about what it is they have sort of in the pipeline. What are you going to be focusing on for the remainder of 2025?
Put an intention on my birthday's in a few weeks, so I put in an intention to have 4 gardens in the community for people to have access to, have education, to be able to continue my work with doctors. And by the end of 2025, I hope to have a sustainable organization to be a beacon and a center where people can come as a resource to find mind, body, spirit, health, and wellness, and be able to be connected to the community, to be able to refer people to ways that they can manage and continue to get there. So I'm hoping that by 2025 to be able to be conducting food as medicine classes and teaching kitchens, teach clinicians how to do this, teach leaders how to do this, teach children how to do this, and to be able to have the food and the medicine right outside, somewhere close, where they can get their food as medicine.
Nice. Nice. Well, we wish you all the best of luck with that, because you're doing fantastic work, and
Yeah.
we need to stick together. Our own sort of parallel polis to the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Just today, we've weaved a little bit of that bridge that we need. So I appreciate it so much, Jackie. It was wonderful to talk with you.
Thank you
Thank you.
very
It was
much.
wonderful to be with you. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you.
And we're always interested in more people to be involved in our conversations. So anyone that you know that you think might be a good fit for these conversations, please let us know. And we look forward to being in touch with you. We'll let you know how the video is processed and all that stuff. So Yeah, yeah. This has
All
been
right. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I'll definitely think on that. It was lovely meeting you both. Thank you. Great to
Thank you
see you
very
together.
much.
Thank you again. Okay. Bye-bye.